a few more fractions for us. So 54 says simplify each expression. And so each of these you guys gets at just the basic rules that you have for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. So as a reminder, in order for us to be able to add fractions, they have to have the same denominator. And remember, the denominator is the number that's here on the bottom. So as it stands, we cannot add these together because this has a denominator of 3 and this has a denominator of 5. So what we need to do is we need to make them have a common denominator. And the easiest way to have a common denominator is to turn them both into the number that you would get when you multiply them together. And here's what I mean. So 3 times 5 is 15. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom here by 3 over 3. So 3 over 3. And remember, when you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. So 4 times 3 is 12. And again, like I said, 5 times 3 is 15. So we turned that into 12 fifteenths. And we're allowed to do that the same way that we're allowed to like change equations. What I did to the top, I did to the bottom. So essentially I kept this fraction balanced. I kept it the same. So now over here, I'm not going to multiply by 3 over 3 because that's not going to get me the 15 or the 15 on the bottom. I'm going to multiply it by 5 over 5. And so again, multiply straight across. So 5 times 2 would give us negative 10. And 5 times 3 would give us that 15 that we were looking for. Bring that plus sign right down. So now that we have a common denominator, now that they're both 15, then we can just add the top like they're normal numbers. So what is negative 10 plus 12? Well, negative 10 plus 12 would give us a positive 2. The denominator stays the same. So 2 fifteenths would be the simplified version of part A. Now, moving on to part B, subtraction is the same idea. I cannot subtract these until they have the same denominator. Easier for us, we only have to change one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this 2 have a denominator of 8. Well, how do we do that? Similar to what we did over here, I'm going to multiply this by 8 over 8. Remember, you can put anything over 1 because it doesn't change anything. So now multiply straight across. So 8 times 2 gives us 16, and 8 times 1 is 8. So we end up with 16 over 8. And you think about it this way, you guys, 16 divided by 8 is 2. So all we did was change this so that we had a denominator of 8. We didn't actually change the value of it. Now bring down your subtraction, bring down your second fraction. So 3/8. And again, just like we did over here in part A, now that our denominator is the same, just deal with the top. So what is 16 minus 3? Well, 16 minus 3 is 13. We didn't change our denominator, so 13 over 8. Now, some places might say like you cannot leave this as an improper fraction, right? An improper fraction is where your top number is greater than your bottom number. So if we wanted to do that, we would want to think, okay, how many times does 8 go into 13? Well, 8 goes into 13 one time, and we have 5 left over, right? 13 minus 8 is 5. So this would become 5 over 8. For me, I'm fine with either of these, right? They mean the same thing. So I've got 13/8 or I have 1 and 5/8. They're both the same. Now, moving on to part C with the multiplication. Multiplying fractions is probably the easiest. All we have to do is multiply straight across. I like to put this over 1, right? So I've got a top and a bottom here, and I've got a top and a bottom here. So if we look at this, we've got negative 3 times 10. So that's going to give us a negative 30. And then we've got a 5 times 1, and so that will give us 5. Here, I do think that we need to change this from the improper fraction, mostly because 30 is divisible by 5, right? 5 goes into 30 evenly. So negative 30 divided by 5 would give us negative 6. And now we're done with that one. So moving on, I would say of all of the fraction rules, that the division one is probably the most trickiest to deal with. So when it comes to dividing fractions, what you do is you first put this guy over 1, and you flip this fraction and change this to a multiplication sign. So here's what I mean. 2/3 stays exactly the same. I'm going to change that to multiplication. So put that little dot, and now flip your fraction. So this becomes negative 1/2, right? I just flipped it over. Now it goes back to this rule over here of multiplying straight across. So 2 times negative 1, that would give us a negative 2. 3 times 2, that would give us 6. In this case, you can absolutely leave this as is, or we can reduce this fraction. So that means dividing the top and the bottom by the same amount. And so if we were to reduce this fraction, I see here that these are both divisible by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 would be a negative 1, and 6 divided by 2 would be 3. So this fraction right here and this fraction right here, these both mean the same thing. This is just the reduced version of it. And we're done with part D of 54. So moving on and looking at 55, normally I don't put these in the same video, but here's why I'm going to do it for this one. It says, use your scientific calculator to compute the value of each expression in the left-hand column and match each result to an answer in the right-hand column. So what you guys need to do is you need to get a calculator, and you need to make sure that you enter this correctly. And if you do enter it correctly, then you will end up with one of these numbers over here. And when you figure out which number it is, I want you to put a line right over here, and I want you to write the number that matches the answer that you got. So I'm going to do part A with you, and then you guys need to do the rest of them. When you finish the rest of them, then I want you to show me, and I will check to see that you guys match them correctly. So if we look at this one, we've got negative 3 plus 16 minus a negative 5. So here, you guys, we've got to get rid of these parentheses right here. I'm going to do this kind of in our head, right, because I don't have a calculator in front of me. So a negative and a negative, remember you guys, cross the line, flip the sign. This would become 16 plus 5. Well, 16 plus 5 would give you 21. I don't know why I paused there. So that would give you 21. And then you've got a minus 3 here. So 21 minus 3, that would give you 18. So if we look on down the line here, it looks like this guy goes with this guy. So over here on my line, I'm not going to write 18. I'm going to write the number that goes with it. So I'm going to write a number 4 right here. And so you guys need to continue that. Remember, you're not doing this in your head. You are using a calculator. Okay, so go get a calculator, do all this, write the answers, and then come show me when you're done.